Really fair. Talking talking about E3, like last year with obviously the Rona and like everything that happened, like a lot of like large in-person venues were like, nope, can't do that. That's not safe, right? Because you don't want like super spreader events, and people usually come away from those events with like a cold or the flu anyway. Let alone like one of the most contagious like illnesses that we've had in recent history, right? This year, from what I understand, they're going to be doing like E3 digitally, but they're actually bringing it back. Whereas like last year, they just didn't do E3, right? And you had like individual consoles or companies doing their own thing. Like Bethesda did their own release, Blizzard did their own release, Xbox, so on and so forth. Um, I look forward to E3 every year. Like I've never been to E3, but I always tune in for the news, and that's always a news cycle that's huge news for gamers. Um, how did you guys feel like as far as having individual platforms doing their own releases or having large content drops from E3?
I I would say I'd rather have it all at once. It starts to create this dynamic where like, who's gonna go first, and then how do we have to like show up that group, and then do we have to like fluff a certain part to just make it seem like we're better than that group? Where like when you show up to a conference, and this is for anything, right? Like any conference you go to, whether it's video games or just like, I mean, I have friends that are going to a mattress conference, and like because they sell mattresses, and like they literally have to just make sure their product looks better than everyone else's right there right then. And so they've got to show you kind of what's like face value, rather than them coming out slowly. And like, Xbox releasing something that they've got exclusives coming out, Blizzard's not on it, Blizzard's releasing something to make it look like they're going to be better on this aspect, Sony's releasing this. It's just, I almost like them all being at one place and just having to focus on their own stuff.
Well, I think that that competition's important. I want to hear from Wrath, so like you go ahead and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, no, I think just from looking at it from a business aspect, I'm curious if any of these companies are going to go back to the way it was before anyway. Because when you talk about it, um, a lot of a lot of artists, a lot of conventions and things like that, they've sold digital passes. People have been willing to pay for digital passes to these events, right? And when you think about events of past, like BlizzCon, what 2 years ago when they unveiled Diablo Immortal, that was the biggest meme on the internet. And they made sure that they knew right there in that event that, that was probably the worst idea that they could have possibly come up with for that fan base. So not only looking at it from, a cost perspective and that they can, do digital events, probably still charge for a lot of these events and people are still going to pay because the stuff is not going away for a long time, admittedly. Um, and they can also at the same time not sort of have those embarrassing viral moments like they had at BlizzCon 2 years ago. I think that they're probably seeing a lot of benefits from running it like this forever. So I'm curious to see if they're even going to go back to in-person events, or if they do, if those events are going to look the same, or if they're going to be totally different.
I mean, that's super fair. Like you said, from a business perspective, like, hey, it's got to be a lot cheaper to broadcast it. And then the benefit to going to those events in person is the swag that you ultimately come away with, right? Like you get the lanyards, the pins, the like merch and stuff, right? And if they're charging people, they could even just put those like gift bags together, ship them along with like your pass, so that you receive it when the event goes live, and you have the best of both worlds for everyone. People can tune in or watch it, after the fact. That's even something like that. If you paid for the ability to have that content, you could just watch the VOD whenever you want to watch the VOD, right? And you're not limited. That's probably a better way to put it. You're not limited to having to tune in, because right now, or in previous years, if you were someone in that news space for gaming, you had to be at E3. Like if you wanted to have relevant info, if you wanted to be relevant in that discussion, you had to be at E3. You had to be present right there. You couldn't be doing any other things, because if you were off doing something else and like Bloodborne 2 got released, but you missed out on being one of those first people to report it, you missed that news cycle, right? You were late to the game at that point. I prefer actually like the all digital, and only specifically because like the ability to maybe go back and rewatch it as a VOD, but also like just being able to tune into that content when I want to. It makes it more accessible. Because previously you'd be in like the middle of your workday and you'd be like you'd see like something blowing up on Google, and then you'd go to like tune into what's going on. You know what I mean? And it was like trying to play catch up with real time news as opposed to just being able to consume it when you want.
Yeah, but what you're missing though is so like people like me, what I would do is if I show up to a conference, one, I have a prerogative to be there. I'm selling my product. And two, I'm trying to mingle with literally everyone else in that room. And every single person that may walk up to my booth, every person that walks up to another person's booth, there's side conversations, there's hotel meetups, there's dinners, there's lunches, there's drinks after, there's everything right around this. That's when business gets done. They always say the meeting after the meeting is only when business gets done, and that's true. And so while it's good for the consumer side, I mean, I was in high school waiting for Apple to release everything, and then like I at noon in French class, I'm like looking on my phone, watching, them up there talking about the new release of the iPhone that I'm gonna go buy in a month. But reality is 5 hours later, I'm on their website looking at all the specs. So they've already got me there. So as a consumer, I don't they're there on the online thing. My thing is just I can't imagine that small company trying to get their step in online where the big companies are only caring about the other big companies. If that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're definitely gonna have the juggernauts trying to slug it out. Like last year
Which they normally do.
when they were doing the individual conferences, like Xbox would say like, "Hey, we got this coming," and then Sony would be like, "Well, what about this?" And we had that back and forth.
Right,
Um,
which is so much better, I think, and we may disagree on this, which is just fine. But I just think having those backroom conversations with the buddies at the bar are more important for moving games along than just having the behemoths come out and just drop it all on us in our laps. So that's I
I
see
mean,
conferences kind of moving that way.
that's super. I mean, we had some of the best titles that released this year as indie games. Like some of
Oh,
the
it's
most viral games, like Among Us, right?